All right, hi there, everyone. Welcome to Believe in Bills. Training camp continues over at St. John Fisher College in Pittsford, and that's where we once again find Sal Majorana, adorned in his Yankees gear, as you might expect. I am Adam Bedini, WGRZ TV, Sports Talk Live, Buffalo. Sal, how you doing 3 days in?
I'm hanging in there. It's been a long. Those first three, it always is every year. The first few years, it's hectic over here. A lot of press conferences, a lot of things going on. Plus, after 5 weeks of doing nothing, you kind of jump right back into the swing of things. So it's a jar to the system, but we're starting to settle in now. But Saturday's a day off, a good day to reset. So that's a good thing.
All right, it is a good thing. Before we get into some of the main topics, there's some injury updates. Why don't you bring us up to speed on those?
Yeah, Dorian Williams, the linebacker, he started camp. He was wearing a brace on his elbow and one on his knee. And the first two practices, he looked like he was okay. But then late on Thursday, he went down, limped off the field, and I saw him come out of the locker room like after that, and he was limping. So then today they announced it was a calf injury, which is weird because he also it wasn't on the left leg, it was the right leg, and he was wearing a boot on the sidelines. So I'm like, that's weird for a calf injury. What do I know? I'm not a doctor, but that's what they said it was, a calf. So we'll see. But the fact that he was in a boot, that doesn't look good. So that could be a little bit of time for him. And then the other guy was AJ Epinesa. And what was funny about him is he got in a little scuffle on Thursday with Jackson Hawes, the tight end. And he left the field right after that. And I don't think he came back. So we were kind of speculating, like, because he did throw a punch. And we were speculating, like, maybe he banged up his hand. But it wasn't that. It turned out that he had an ankle injury. Now, they had gone to the ground when they scuffled. So I don't know. I mean, they didn't really specify what happened, but they called it an ankle. He was in civvies today, not working. So there's two more guys that add to the list of we started with four guys. The same four guys are still out. So, yeah, the Bills already 3 days in have six guys that are out at this point.
All right, obviously situations we will continue to follow. But in the meantime, speaking of injuries and a guy who has, a history of them who's coming back, Tre'Davious White with a couple of major ones. But back with the Bills, former first-round pick back in 2017. And he's one of the major storylines of the offseason as they look to address the second cornerback position. And, he continues to look like, anyway, you had written today that, and we had speculated to the effect that he in all likelihood is going to be the day one starter. And he seems to be playing up to that, at least early in camp here.
Yeah, I mean, look, when they signed him, I kind of just shrugged my shoulders and thought, here they're just bringing one of their favorite guys back. He doesn't have a job anywhere else. He was a free agent at the end of the year. The Ravens let him go. So I really didn't think much of it, especially after he had blown out his knee and then blown out his Achilles. We saw him play last year. Didn't go well for the Rams. They traded him. And then he played a little bit with Baltimore, but wasn't starting for them. So I thought his career was kind of over. He comes back to the Bills. Okay, see what he's got. Well, it turns out, Adam, he might be the starter on day one. Now, there's a couple things that go into that. A, they love him. They know what he's all about. And they've made a big deal of telling us, and Trey Wright said the same thing today, that he had a full off season for the first time in 3 years to actually get ready for a football season. He wasn't rehabbing an injury. He could go through his whole regular regimen to get ready. So that has apparently made a big difference in how he's come back here to training camp. So there's that. Plus, Max Hairston is the first-round pick. But, you and I both know that breaking into the NFL as a rookie at cornerback is one of the hardest things you can do. It's a very difficult position. Some of those top guys that are, maybe top 10 picks, they can do it. Trey White did it as the 27th pick way back when on a defense that wasn't really very good. So he had a great opportunity. But I think they're going to slow play Max Hairston. I think they're going to let him grow into, making the adaptation from college to the NFL because they know they've got in the back pocket a guy like Trey White. And if Trey White can play, I think they're going to play him. You know that McDermott would always probably favor a veteran, especially at this time in this team's history where they are clearly in a window that they need to win. I think we're going to see him, Trey White, as a starter, and then maybe Hairston at some point can unseat him. But I asked Trey point blank. I was the one who asked the question. I said to him, should anyone be surprised if you're the starter on day one? And he said, absolutely not. And then he ripped off a couple F words in a good way, saying that's been, a friggin' great offseason and this and that. He was adamant when I asked that question that, if I'm starting on week one, it's because I earned it and I'm going to be good. So, hey, good. More power to him.
Well, you mentioned the fact that he had the full off season to actually focus on his body and not rehab a specific injury. I think that's a factor. And I also saw the reference to the fact that despite the time he's spent away, he returns. He's in a framework of familiarity, let's call it, in terms of this defense. And that may serve him well, and probably is at this point, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, Deion Dawkins was talking yesterday, and he said, it's like having Uncle Trey back. Right? Uncle Trey, his kids were there, and his kids call him Uncle Trey. Remember, they're from the same draft class. They grew up together in Buffalo in this organization. So there's a lot of guys on this team who were teammates of Trey White, some for several years. So he is definitely back in a place of familiarity. Let's face it, Adam, he never wanted to leave. I mean, he wanted to be a Buffalo Bill for his whole career, and the Bills really had no choice last year. They had to let him go because of his contract and the injury situation. It just wasn't a financially, smart thing to keep Trey White. So they had to move on. Trey White understood that's the business of football, but now the opportunity is here for him to return. He's not making what he was making originally in Buffalo, and I think he's okay with that because he wants to be here with a team. He knows the defense, knows the coaches, knows a lot of the players. It's a good situation all the way around. Now, he has to go out and prove it. He's got to be able to play. All we're seeing right now is 3 practices with no pads on, so we'll see pretty soon here. But like I said earlier, I think ultimately he'll probably be the guy at least early in the season.
Let's keep it to the secondary as we continue to run down the topics and safety position. I know defensive coordinator Bobby Babich had a comment about takeaways, which were so key for the success of this defense last year. That was just a huge factor, despite the other shortcomings, to maybe offset some of those. But speaking of takeaways, Taylor Rapp is a storyline, the safety.
Yeah, Babich was just a throwaway line. He was talking about various things, and he said he doesn't want to critique anything at this point. It's way too early. But the one thing I'll say is that we only have one takeaway in 2 days. Okay, well, fine. They go out and Taylor Rapp gets 3 picks. Now, only one of them came in an 11-11, team drill. There was one in a one-on-one route, and I even forget who. I think it was Allen, and I forget who he was even throwing to. So that was just a one-on-one thing. And then he had one in the 7-on-7, which that's unusual because usually 7-on-7 is a passing clinic. It's generally skewed very heavily to the offense. So that was a good one. And then he had the one in the team drill. So, yeah, nice. Nice that he could do that. Again, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to this stuff right now, Adam, until they start putting pads on. But it was good to see him make those plays. Look, I like Taylor Rapp. There's a lot of Bills fans that are, because we were so spoiled by Michael Hyde and Jordan Poyer, everyone thinks Taylor Rapp is just some guy. He's back here for a 3rd year because he's a good player. I think he's a good player for this team. His problem has been he hasn't always been healthy. But when he's healthy and out there, guy can play. I think they're in a good spot with him.
Moving on, Joey Bosa. Back for the start of training camp, coming off the calf injury during the offseason. Big addition on a 1-year deal to try and improve and bolster the pass rush. And we're beginning to learn at least a little bit more. Again, as you mentioned, it's early, 3 days in, don't want to read too much. But as for how they're going to kind of manage him, because injuries have been such a factor in the risk-reward associated with that signing. So bring us up to speed on what the indications are they're going to do it with Bosa.
Yeah, McDermott said on the first day that they had a plan for him to monitor his reps, and then Babich reiterated it today, and we saw it play out. The first day, Bosa was involved in most of the team stuff. It's like a regular routine or regular turn of the rotation, and then on Thursday he pretty much sat out all of it. He did some positional drills, but he was not in on any of the 11-on-11. And then today again, he's back out there in those drills. So it looks like it's going to be, maybe every other day. This will be good. They've got a day off here, so maybe he comes back and can work on Sunday too. But look, this guy's got a history of injuries. The last 3 years, we know, has been a rough go for him. The Bills are sort of taking a flyer on a one-year deal, hoping that he can stay healthy and be an impact player. It was the same thing they told us when they signed Von Miller, right? They were looking for a guy, not so much in September and October, November, but a guy in December and January who could be a big player for them in the pass rush. I think the same thing with Joey Bosa. So they want to get him through training camp, make sure he doesn't get hurt because he's already been hurt in the spring, and then, just monitor his reps all season long and then unleash him, hopefully, when it matters most in December and January.
Switching gears to the offensive side now, and among the players that we kind of heard in the end-of-season news conferences, calls for improvement, and certainly receiver Keon Coleman falls into that category. Showed some signs, but then, dealt with an injury and his performance kind of faltered as things went on. What have you seen from him? I mean, I suppose it's fair to say, and again, we're early in camp here, but at this point, the word inconsistent has sort of defined his time in the National Football League.
Yeah, I mean, that's the word we used last year. You referenced he got off to a decent enough start as a rookie, and then he got hurt, and he came back, and it's been well documented. Everybody knows, and Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane saying it, that he did not come back to their satisfaction after that injury. So I think there was a lot of focus put on Keon going into this season, and it felt like during the spring, he himself admitted that he thought he called his season trash. Might have been a little bit harsh. I don't think it was trash, but he had a blunt assessment of how he thought he played last year. And we were told, at least, we don't see these things, but we were told he was very, very active in the offseason on his own, and then coming back to Buffalo and making sure he was working on all the things, all the areas where he lacked last year. So now we get to training camp, and it's the same thing, Adam. I mean, there are plays where he just looks tremendous. He looks like a second-round draft pick would. Runs a nice route, makes the catch, gets some yards after catch, and then, like today, just two brutal drops. He had a couple really nice plays. In fact, he beat Trey White over the middle. Trey slipped a little bit, but it was a nice throw, and Coleman made the play, and boom, he's off to the races. And then 5 minutes later, he gets himself wide open over the middle. Allen throws it right on the numbers, and it goes right through his hands. And he realized it, too. He, looked to the sky like he couldn't believe he dropped it. But this is what we see too much with Keon. I mean, the first day he was terrible. They were working mostly red zone the whole practice, and he was showing the same things that he showed last year. Wasn't able to separate from defenders, really no matter who covered him. Seemed to get the edge. Then on Thursday, they were more open field stuff, and he was making plays. It was a good day. Today was both. We saw both sides of Keon. So you start to wonder, they've got guys like Josh Palmer here. Elijah Moore has come in. These are veteran players that, he's going to start losing reps to, because Shakir is going to play a lot. He's going to start losing reps to these guys if he doesn't start showing the ability to be more consistent, not only, series to series, but play to play. He needs to be better. So we'll see. I mean, I've been in the camp of I just don't know with him. I'm not sure he was worth the pick when they made it last year. I understand they needed a receiver, and there was that run in the first round that kind of knocked them out, and they kind of settled for him, I felt like. He's got some work to do to prove that he was the right guy.
Yeah, it's kind of, you don't want to read in too much, but given the history here, he was a guy I thought you might see try to make a statement early on, and I suppose he is, but it rings all too familiar at this point. You dropped it. Go ahead. And
what drives me crazy, too, is he is a physical talent. Right? I mean, I think he's 6'3" or 4", maybe. I mean, he's a big kid. He's got some speed. It's not like he's, he can. We saw last year there were some plays where he caught the ball and got yards after catch. It's there. The physical talent's there. He's just got to get in the right headspace, and his technique just has to be better. And he's got to stop making these blunderous mistakes where you drop a ball. Why that play in the regular season, that pass would have gone for 30, 35 yards. Well, it ended up being 0 yards because he dropped it.
Yeah, and you don't want to, I've thought about the term, and I'm always hesitant to use this because it's hard to assess from where we sit, right? But like the term football instincts, right? And I think with what we've seen from him, he does put himself in position to make plays, right? So that sort of speaks to that issue. He's able to get in the spot to make the play, but he just is inconsistent in doing so. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's exactly the problem. And you say he puts himself in a position sometimes. Other times, he, like we said last year, he struggled. When there was press man coverage, he struggled to get separation, and that was one of the knocks on him in college. He was not a great separator, but in college, it's not quite as big of a deal. He was a good contested catch guy in college, so he could, if he couldn't get the separation, he was big and physical enough to still win on those 50-50 balls. Last year, against NFL cornerbacks and safeties, maybe he wasn't winning those balls.
Okay, you dropped a couple of names there in Palma and Elijah Moore. What have you seen? Let's talk about Moore specifically, too. I think, and we addressed this in our opening show for training camp as well, because of his history. He obviously has talent, but the history of the teams he's been with and the quarterbacks he's played with, right? It's very interesting to see now that he's paired with an elite, the reigning MVP in the NFL, and Josh Allen. What have you seen from Moore to this point?
Yeah, I interviewed him after practice today. I'm doing that exact story that'll be published probably Saturday or Sunday about that fact. He was a late spring addition here because he kind of played it. He wanted to wait things out. He wanted to wait till after the draft to see what teams had done and who was going to be in need of a player of his caliber after the draft. And the Bills ended up being the perfect fit, he felt. And they agreed. He's from South Florida, Fort Lauderdale, and Brady's from down there too. And because Brady said the other day that he's kind of been following his career ever since he got into the NFL because he was a Lauderdale kid. So he kind of knew a little bit about him. I think that had an influence on when the Bills went looking for in addition at the wide receiver position. So he comes in here and he admitted that. What caught me a little bit off guard, I asked him, I said, you've caught 200 passes in the NFL, which is kind of remarkable given the quarterbacks you had. And he kind of said to me, he said, no, it should have been more. And he said, I hold myself accountable. I could have been better for those guys.
You like that.
And you like that. But then you look at the guys who were throwing him the ball and you realize, he's got Josh Allen now. He doesn't have Dorian Thompson, Robertson, and Joe Flacco and Zach Wilson, whoever else, Deshaun Watson, all these guys that he had with the Jets and Browns. He's got Josh Allen. And he said, obviously, Josh was a big part of why he wanted to come here. There were other factors. He thought he could fit into this offense pretty well. But when you got a quarterback like Josh Allen, he said, I'm not going to downgrade the guys I've already played with. But, there's a difference between what he saw from them and what he's already seen with Josh Allen in just OTA practices and training camp practices.
All right, so first 3 days in the books. Any other quick observations you want to throw in here before we wrap up this edition?
No. So far it's been the Bills have been very specific on what they're working on. Red zone the first day. Today was a lot of third down. I would say the first of the 11-on-11 periods, probably 3/4 of it was just on third down, offense and defense, obviously. So they clearly have got a very detailed plan on what they're trying to get accomplished. I saw a great tweet from J.J. Watt yesterday. He was talking about how you need to stop keeping stats in training camp practices, right? This is a big thing in Cleveland because there's like 12 quarterbacks there, and every single play is being charted, and they're keeping track of which quarterback is doing better. And he made the point, you have no clue what they're actually trying to accomplish in a training camp practice. And keeping stats is silly. That's why, Adam, if you notice, you will never, ever see me quote any stat or tweet about Josh was 6 for 6 in this, and never, ever in a million years. It's just pointless stuff. I get why people do it, but I just don't do that. So I look at big picture when I'm watching practice, and I pay attention to, philosophies and concepts they're trying, like I said, third down and red zone and all that. But to try to make evaluations on, Josh was 6 for 6. Well, maybe, whatever. Right. Maybe the defense was doing something in particular that left that wide open because they're working on some other coverage or whatever. It's just silly. So just wanted to get that out there in case people were wondering why I don't track every play like so many guys do.
No, and it's not something I did through the years either. But I mean, you would expect them to work on third down. Every team in the NFL is working on third down. It is worth pointing out that was kind of a sore spot for the defense last year, right?
Well, and again, I'm fine. I'll point that stuff out. But I'm not going to say, the Bills went 3 or 4 on third down. And it's just
right.
This is what they're working on.
Right.
So, anyways, that's what I see in practice. And I actually went up today to the press box over there because you get a better. I was down in the field the first 2 days, and all the guys are down there. For whatever reason, they just prefer being close to it. I like the bird's eye view, and I was able to see so much more today sitting up there. So I'll probably go back up there and keep watching practice. I don't know why more of my colleagues don't join me, but maybe they will. I sort of talked a couple guys into it.
I would always spend time on the field. On the field. That's actually a good point because it can be hard to see. Sometimes they break things up, right? Yeah. And you want to be able to see.
Plus, you never have a good view on the sideline because there's always somebody standing in your way. So I'm like, this is stupid. What am I trying to see? I can just go up and see it perfectly. So.
All right.
36 years on the beat, you start learning these little tricks of the trade, right Adam?
Always learning. That's what. That's why Sal Majorana. That's why you continue to thrive, my friend. All right. Really appreciate it. Enjoy your Saturday off. Bill's back on the field on Sunday over at St. John Fisher. So for Sal Majorana of the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, I am Adam Benini, WGRZ TV, Sports Talk Live, Buffalo. Thanks for being with us here on Believe in Bills.